Hey you, welcome to Simply Worldbuilding. Today we're going to be diving into the jungle area. We've only fleshed it out a little bit so far, and so I think other than the sort of main area with this amplification rift, this is probably going to be the last area we really need to semi-elaborate on before actually starting to expand on other factors.
So pretty much everywhere on these two continents has at least some level of identity now, and we can kind of make it mesh with the world as we see fit when we start doing other layers. But this is the last place it doesn't really have much of an identity yet, beyond the idea that we knew that there were going to be elves here. Here there be elves.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be kind of the sort of central home of the elves, because we have an area sort of over on the other continent that's forest that's going to be home to the elves, but the sort of higher and more Feywild attuned elves, I think we're thinking was going to be over here.
The elitist elves.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't even necessarily have to be within that stereotype. We have the freedom to do what we want with it, but it's there. That stereotype's there. So we did one thing that kind of popped into my head immediately when trying to drum up levels of inspiration for this area was the fact that we do have this long, winding, and very important looking river that passes its way through. And sort of what immediately called out to me on that was the Amazon River.
Yeah, definitely.
Now I don't really know a ton about it, but from the little tiny bits I've been able to gather, there are a few sort of legends and things like that that I found had a bit of a theme that kind of lends itself to something cool that we could make. The sort of first idea that popped into my head based on sort of what I was reading is the idea of a shapeshifter.
Okay.
From again the little bit that I actually dug up, I saw a few legends to do with shape-shifting things. One of them, I guess, was like a shape-shifting dolphin or something, like a river dolphin or something like that. And we don't necessarily need to do a dolphin of like, I'm not following that exactly, but it did give me the idea that because one of the things inherently to do with D&D's idea of the Feywild, at least in my interpretation of it, is the idea that the Feywild is very much about change. So that immediately stuck out to me as a cool theme. Is what if the elves or people who live here are essentially shapeshifters of some kind? So that was an idea that kind of popped into my head immediately. I'm not sure if we want to make that to do with whatever beast is also here.
Yeah.
Or if that's going to be purely based on the peoples that are here. And I mean, even realistically, like elves, one of the reasons you find elves everywhere is because they change towards their environment.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, the idea of a sort of shape-shifting people was something that kind of stuck out to me immediately about this area.
Okay, so shapeshifts how? Like
magic.
Chameleon, like outright changes like its bones and stuff? like what level of change are we talking?
Yeah, well, see, that's the beauty of it, is I didn't really get that far. This was sort of just, again, merely an idea that kind of sprouted out to me. But, I mean, it could be almost varying levels. Like, there could be animals or some and stuff like that are more able to do it more completely, and then maybe the people can't quite do it, or maybe even the other way around. Like, change is less pronounced in the animals, but the people have kind of turned it into an art, and so they can figure out how to do it more completely.
Well, one of the first things that jumped into my head when you mentioned like shapeshifters was like a resident creature here, right? And when I try and think of a creature that inhabits a jungle, I don't know why, but my mind immediately goes to jaguar. And the idea of a jaguar that can turn invisible or like shapeshift and stuff as well is super interesting to me, because it's like already such like a sneaky threat that also, when it can kind of play tricks or straight up be invisible or something like that, very scary.
Yeah.
And if it's like a big one, like if this was the area's resident Leviathan, super cool idea to like have this big ass jaguar that like doesn't really make a noise when it moves, like hopping between branches and stuff like that, and it can like change shape where it can become invisible or whatever, or like chameleon blend in kind of thing, like Predator hanging out in the trees.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing that does stick out to me, and we had brought this up with the other sort of elf forest as well, when it comes down to just thinking of giant creatures that are going to be in a space that's very, very tight, is like, how the heck are you going to do that? We sort of solved that with the idea of the elk, in just the fact that it's like, well, the forest is also huge, like piece by piece, like each tree is gigantic, and so the idea of this huge elk or deer making its way through isn't a problem. Now, I think we can almost do the opposite with that, is like where maybe the true form of this jaguar is huge, but it has the ability to easily make its way through this jungle and navigate it no matter the what gets in its way, because it can change into the other creatures of the forest if it needs to make its way through the trees. Not that a jaguar would have any problem with that, but a big one might. It can change into like a monkey or a chimp or something like that, or if it needs to go through the water, it can change into a crocodile or a frog or something like that. And so its ability to navigate this place is made easier by the fact that it might be able to shapeshift. The also idea, you kind of mentioned like it being tricky as well, maybe sort of being a bit of a trickster deity in some sort of way, could also be interesting, at least in the legends of the people, even if it's not overtly doing something like that. Like in people's encounters with it, it might they might interpret its behavior as something trying to trick them or lure them somewhere, or even try and teach them a lesson, but in a roundabout way. So that could be an idea as well.
I really like the idea of that, like having like the trickster deity and stuff like that. But I don't know if we should blend those things, because we kind of want, for the most part, these leviathans to be separated from deities and gods and stuff like that, and to also more or less be just bad.
Yeah.
Like there's a couple of exceptions, but for the most part, just bad. And we could have it be where this is not one of the ones where it is just bad. Maybe it does have some kind of desire to teach these lessons, or maybe that's just kind of how it's been portrayed in myth. But it's kind of a cool potential that we have to have those things as two separated things. This is kind of one thing too, is like, I know the jaguar is kind of, it's such a cool animal to go with, but also when I think of like change or shape shifting or something like that, another thing that kind of pops into my mind is like hallucination as well. And so maybe if it isn't a jaguar, it could, and I know we came up with a toad over here, but some sort of frog or snake or poisonous thing one way or another, something that if you lick it, you're gonna have a bad time. And so maybe, or even we could separate the two. There could be a difference, but there could be multiple. There could be this huge jaguar. There could also be this sort of I'm picturing like a poisonous frog of some kind that could also be like a shapeshifter, that like it might not be like a leviathan or something like that, but it could literally be like some sort of like forest deity or jungle deity of some kind. So we haven't started a proper collection of notes yet. Yeah. So remind me, where did we decide that we were gonna have this big old like spiritual elk guy that you had mentioned?
It was in this area right by Theros, because there was the forested area. Right. And so yeah, that's where we had decided that was, and it was even interesting that it's going to be, because in the idea that these places, these places separated, the elves would actually still kind of be touching. Exactly, yeah. So maybe there was like kind of two different camps of civilizations within this jungle. Maybe one that kind of follows. Who knows if both of them are going to be shape-shifting? Again, that was kind of an idea, and I still do want to kind of find a way for it to happen.
It's a cool idea.
Maybe there are people who are in sort of the quote-unquote like the jaguar camp and like the frog camp. You know what I mean? They're like kind of maybe if not warring but opposed civilizations that represent different pieces of the natural order. Like the jaguar could be an obvious representation of just like the fact that it's like, well, dude's gotta eat. And so the idea of like the natural order of things being the survival of the fittest, and sort of this other camp to do with the frog having a little bit more of a one with nature and plant life,
sort of spiritual,
a little bit more hippie, but a little bit more spiritual than the other camp
like
as
the
well.
Primal thing,
exactly. And so they may both sort of represent nature, and they're representing it in the way they believe is appropriate, and but in actuality, like both of them are two pieces of the greater picture in a way.
I really like the idea of this, like culturally wise, because I think that kind of is like they're both aspects of life. It's kind of like the duality of life, right? Like you've got the sort of physical camp of like the doing what you need to do to survive, and this is our maybe not necessarily deity or whatever, but this is kind of how that's symbolized. And then you have sort of like the elevated plane of like the, you know, this is the sort of spiritual and like enlightened camp or whatever, right? And those are both like body and mind, two parts of the same whole. Do we want them physically represented by those specific things, or do we want to kind of have that being like more of a cultural thing rather than a physical thing where they're actual leviathans or whatever roaming around?
I think the idea of both of these sort of choosing one that they believe represents them in a way, I think is cool, because they're like you say, like these leviathans aren't necessarily good. In fact, most of them are going to be opposed to anything humanity wants to do. Just inherently. You can also say that about a lot of wild animals in real life. And choosing something that sort of represents your culture, or worshiping like a certain type of animal for what it represents to you, is, you'll notice in just cultures in general, but especially like more ancient cultures. And so the idea that both of these have sort of picked one is kind of cool to me, just because even if they're not like, oh yeah, come on in, like they choose to use these things as sort of deities representatively to them. Now, something that just popped into my head, because I was looking up animals that are around the Amazon area. The jaguar is a big one for sure, and it's fucking cool. And I don't want to remove that one, but I think a little bit for the sake of diversifying the types of animals that we have, because like I said, we already came up with a toad, so I'm a little hesitant to make it a frog. But something that popped into my head as, again, a peaceful counterpart to the jaguar is a capybara.
Cute.
And I love the idea of just like this really hippie capybara who's just chill. And he's just like down with the flow of nature, man. And
I like that.
And so he's this capybara is like their sort of representative, because like have you seen the memes about like capybaras just emit peace energy, man? Like just a whole bunch of animals just like huddling around it and just chilling. And I like the idea of expanding upon that to a bigger scale, literally.
Yeah, absolutely.
Big ass like capybara, and he's just like, just for some reason everything in the world likes him. And so these people have kind of tried to take that and run with it as well. They're like, oh well, if everything can live in harmony, then great. And that directly opposes the survival of the fittest of the jaguar.
Exactly. There is a third possible animal that we know sort of lives around the Amazon.
Okay.
Jeff Bezos.
Oh yeah. Well, he's a bit of an apex predator, though.
That's true.
Like he would just absolutely eat up everything and consume all life that exists. So
we'll table that one.
Yeah, I don't think it would fit well in the jungle, because it would be immediately cardboard boxes within the first 3 weeks.
Okay, so we've got sort of the two different camps then.
Yeah.
We've got sort of like the more peaceful side of life.
Yeah.
And then we've got the more like, focused on survival type worshipping people there for the jaguar and the capybara. I like the capybara.
For sure. Who doesn't like the capybara?
Yeah. What do we think for places of civilization?
Like cities specifically?
Yeah, cities or places that
towns.
are...
I don't know about like specific locations, but I do notice that we have 2 camps. And a very convenient river that bisects the jungle area into two specific areas. And so it could be interesting to have almost they have like a certain level of territory, and the and just like the jungle and its ecosystems seem to be split a little bit by this river. And on one side, you have a lot more of what might represent the jaguar, and on the other side, you have a lot more of what might represent the capybara.
Yeah.
And that happens, I think, on a civilization level, and also on a physical level within the jungle a little bit.
I do think that, thematically wise, if we were going to split it via the river, that it makes sense in my brain to have the jaguar be on the... the western side of the river?
Yeah, the most western side.
Close to, or like closer anyway, at least to this like rift, this flux thing that is causing all of this rampant danger.
Yeah, I agree. I was going to suggest that as well.
That's going to kind of put it into the people's minds more, focusing on survival and stuff like that, rather than, it's fine, we're all chill here because they're so much closer to the danger. And then also in a way, like, this jaguar could potentially also like actually help them from other threats that are kind of traveling their way.
Yeah.
It could be extremely territorial and take out some of these smaller things that would normally be a problem for them. And so in that way, they're kind of thankful for it existing, but also...
It eats a few people a year, but also we'd all be dead if it wasn't there. It kind of works almost in the same way that our sort of bison or bull was working over in this sort of plains area that's next to Fearos as well, and in that stuff was creeping in from the swamp, but it's sort of a defender in that sort of way as well. Now, this is in almost the opposite way, because this jaguar's frankly looking out for itself.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
But it's a convenience to the people in one way or another, and so yeah, that's a good point. That it would probably be towards the more hostile environment, where whereas this capybara and its sort of peoples and civilization would probably be closer to the coast.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I do like that specific area, especially because I think if you really did measure it out piece by piece, there's more territory on the jaguar side.
Yeah.
And realistically, I think that would make more sense just as well, because as a
rapidly moving, hunting, prowling predator
will overtake. It'll
exactly.
claim its territory more effectively. But also a kind of cool part, it almost creates a bit of a yin and yang sort of representation.
Absolutely.
Forgive me if I'm ignorant on this subject, but one thing I have heard when people talk about the yin and yang symbol as well is most people kind of get fixated on the darker white parts. There's the little bit of dark and light. There's the little bit of light and dark. But there's also the sort of Eastern idea of the way, or the path, the Tao, I think it's called.
Yeah.
And I think, at least from, again, this is just stuff I've heard, is that the area in between the yin and yang is supposedly the optimal place to be. It's the path in between. And so the idea that both of these creatures and both of these civilizations all rely on the river, which is the path in between them, sort of is a cool idea to me, because like we said, they both represent different sort of aspects of nature, but in reality they are all dependent and rely on the path that on the river, or the path that is between them and unifies them while also separating them. So I think visually that's just kind of a
very cool.
You only get it from the top down, but I do think it works on sort of multiple levels all the way down.
It does,
it's capybaras all the way down.
Yeah.
But yeah, so when it came down to like specific placements of places, though, I nothing specifically pops out at me.
I more meant like, do you want like big cities? Do you want small camps? Do you want like what does kind of life look like for people here?
I think it's going to be almost diametrically opposed again in a certain way because of the nature of these people. This jaguar is always hunting. It's always moving. You're not going to be able to put down any sort of civilization, otherwise you're going to become a regular food source.
For sure.
So these people, I think, are going to be very used to the hunter-gatherer lifestyle of constantly moving around and trying to find food on their own, hunting food on their own, following the paths of food that they can find in a similar way that the jaguar would itself. And so they're sort of mimicking it in that way. Whereas on the other side of the jungle, where things are more peaceful, the idea of a township actually managing to grow without danger feels more appropriate just based on the theming.
Totally.
Now, I wouldn't want anything to be as big as a city, because again, I think the nature theme of these people is going to be important. Just having small little areas where they kind of just call home. Little areas that they've kind of cut off, and they're probably just particular landmarks or beautiful places, like just by a waterfall or this really cool cliff or this, that, or the other thing. And so I think they'd probably set up shop there. It's not going to be really much more than a camp. The idea of it being more stationary, I think, would make sense thematically.
Definitely, yeah.
Now, coming back to what originally sort of spawned the idea is the idea of the shape-shifting. Are we going to do that with one of these creatures? Are we going to do it with both? Are we going to do it with exclusively the people? Is it going to be maybe just a theme of the jungle around them?
Well, here's a thought process that I had as well.
Okay.
If it were to be one of the two, there's an argument for sure to be said about it being sort of the more like spiritually elevated, quote unquote, of the two. However, I kind of also see a similar argument being for the jaguar. Not only first and foremost because like that's kind of how their lifestyle is. Their lifestyle is constantly changing. They're constantly on the move. It changes around them. Life changes. But also they're closer to this flux thing, this rift, this portal, whatever, that is actively changing the world as well around them. And so kind of maybe my mind says that it would be more like the jaguar side that would lean that way, and we could have it be like, because I kind of think that it's almost like the world changes around them, so in more of like a thematic way, but also maybe the people do have some sort of level of ability to also change as well, and be that like just in sort of like the camouflage ability kind of way, or just like thematically, spiritually wise, they kind of like believe in that more because the world changes around them, their life is constantly changing, their scenery is constantly changing, and then they're also close to this thing that is actively changing the world, like physically.
Yeah, I can see, you can see kind of the argument on both sides. I kind of did just have a thought, and again, thinking of a D&D perspective, like druids are just straight up a thing. Like that just change into animals. Like that's just a thing that they do. And so maybe having the idea of having two different sort of druid circles that are represented by both of these things. Now on one side, the sort of changes that they'll make to their body or animals that they choose to become are going to be mostly based on, again, survival of the fittest, defending yourself or hunting something down. It's going to be stuff more to do with like changing your eyes for keen vision, growing claws or horns, getting more agile on your feet, certain things like that. Whereas maybe in the other camp, a lot more of what their magic sort of, or their practice of magic sort of does for them is camouflage them so that they can more easily blend into the environment. Maybe they do have a level of ability to sort of charm things so that what could have been a hostile encounter dissipates into a more peaceful scenario. So the idea of having, again, two sort of circles of druid or camps, again, that have different priorities and therefore change in different ways is kind of a cool idea. And I also like, this was again just a visual, I like the idea that it's not it's not like a druid in D&D or just a game or something like that. Once you're a good old druid boy, you can just change into that animal exactly one for one. I like to think that it's maybe more of a learned process, and so someone who's a little bit younger at it, like, oh cool, I can grow claws now.
Yeah.
And then slowly, like, they can change their skin to appear more like a jaguar pattern or something like that. Like they slowly develop the skill, and then there's just like like your adventuring party shows up and they're like, oh, we're taking you to see our master, and they pull back the curtain to reveal a single capybara and a flower crown just chilling in a hut, like, hey. That's like, who are you? I'm the Grand Druid. Come on in. Welcome to my home.
It kind of smells a little bit like weed.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's a little smoky in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, like only the master druids have the ability to just like fully transform. And despite that funny visual, I'd also think it would be cool on the other side, like them revering the person who can fully transform into a jaguar, and they sort of treat them as some sort of chief or something like that.
So yeah. So here's what I'm kind of thinking.
Okay.
I think that like maybe the people that are sort of like these druids are kind of like the like cultural leaders, like the sort of
spiritual leaders.
Yeah, exactly. But maybe it's not everybody is a druid. I think that it makes more sense for there to be like, you know, some people that are chosen or born with this or whatever, or decide to learn it or something like that. You know, take the way of the druid. That can do these things, and they have like all kind of manner of like actually like physically important, helpful things they can do, as well as being like the spiritual leaders as well.
Yeah, totally.
But that not every single elf in these lands is a druid.
Okay.
Thing.
Yeah.
Just because I think like there's gonna be quite a few people here, and for all, like, I mean, and maybe like a lot of people do aspire to be this, but for everybody to be a druid, you know, I think that puts an entire portion of the world into a box. I mean, and I think that there should be more variety. But I do think that that's a really cool idea for like society and culture and stuff like that, and for like their spiritual beliefs, as well as being like you know, the leader of like the hunting party or whatever is a powerful druid and can do these things, and everybody else, like, maybe they can to a certain extent, but that's their leader for that, because they're incredibly good at this, and they're like one with nature and all that, and then they can go out and get all this food, and then they bring it back to the other people.
Well, it's not only their hunting prowess, but their ability to integrate themselves into the area around them is also an important factor, and that's totally okay as an idea as well, because it also it takes away from the druidness of the area, but it also adds a level of impressiveness and importance to the idea of being such a masterful druid, or even being one at all. It does elevate the status of these people a little bit more, and I think it should still be like a pretty large percentage.
Definitely,
like like in between 20 to 40, depending on how kind of we want to slice it. I think it's going to be something that's very well integrated, and yeah, I do think that the druids are basically going to be like the leaders of these people, but they just, you know, they don't judge if you can't grow claws or anything like that. But also I think what it sort of, an idea that it presents to me is the idea that, are you born with it? Is it Maybelline? Is it some other sort of indeterminable factor? And the idea that came to me is the idea that both camps have like some sort of challenge or way to become a druid that specifically has to do with both of these creatures, which even adds more importance to them. What I was thinking was for the jaguar, my initial thought was like, you have to fight it. I'm like, you're not winning. Like, it's a jaguar and it's huge. You're not winning if a jaguar half its size.
You're not gonna win in a fight against a regular jaguar. Like, yeah.
1 out of 5 people thinks they can fist fight with a jaguar. Maybe the idea that all you have to do is just go take a piece of it. Somehow, whether it's off its body or probably off its body, but you have to find a way to get up close to it, get a little piece of hair or something, and then bring it back, and maybe they use that piece of it to sort of integrate like just some sort of ritual integrates it into you, and so you get the power it has. And then on the other side, instead of sort of like a less scary challenge, is you have to go up to the capybara, and it basically has to choose you and imbue that power onto you. Again, like separating the ways these things are done is like, it's the survival of the fittest. If you get eaten, you didn't deserve to be indoctrinated in the first place. But also on the other camp, it's like the capybara has to see the potential in you to like bring its influence and peace.
Yeah, and I also like the idea that like it's still like an adventure. Like maybe you leave camp by yourself, they say good luck, you have to still like survive out in the wilds alone and find this thing that has moved since the last time anybody found it. And then hopefully be worthy of its blessing or whatever, right?
Exactly, and you have to do it in a way that it itself would sort of select, or just like the themes again that these people apply to them.
I'm kind of on the edge about the Jaguar one. Like, I think it's not a bad idea, definitely, to have like portions of this thing or whatever they do some sort of ritual with.
Oh, with the challenge, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because if you're talking 20 to 40% of the population on this side of the river is like engaging this regularly with this jaguar, that's horrifying. A lot of people are gonna die and fail, and like that's a big can you take droppings? Can you take tufts of fur that were left behind? Like, does it always have to be, well, we're sending out some people to go hope this thing is sleeping and pluck some fur? Like that's so much more of a challenge.
Well, it might account for the difference of 20 to 40%. The Jaguar people might be closer to 20.
Yeah,
they send out 40%, but they probably only get 20%. And the idea of the droppings thing did pop into my mind, and I'm like, that probably just doesn't count. What that was pieces of something else. But yeah, you're right, like hair left behind or something like that at the same time. Then again, if you do end up finding some hair, you're in its territory at that
still
point.
Also resourceful still. Like it's not nothing.
So yeah, we can kind of modify that how we see fit, but I do see what you mean. But like I said, that might even just account for the difference. But also, this is the thing, is the 20%, if you put the 40% of the capybara druids up against the 20% of the jaguar druids, I think the jaguar ones would win. You know what I mean? Like, they are survival of the fittest, and so there's a smaller percent of them, but they are
the fittest.
Yeah, they are, exactly. And so that might even be, like in The Last Airbender, it's like, oh, all of the airbenders, like every one of the air nomads is an airbender for these sort of spiritual reasons, and then there's different percentages through everyone else. And it's kind of the same thing here, where like, they have a smaller percentage of these sort of special people, but they're specialized and like hyper powerful. Does that work?
No, that sounds cool to me. Like, maybe that's just a part of like their culture, their rite of passage. Like, when you're 15 or something like that, you have to go give it your best shot. And if you don't like that, you best be crossing the river and hoping that they'll take you in over there, because you're not being, you're not one of these anymore. You're not one of the Jaguar crew.
Well, I mean, even if you fail, like I guess you're just not one of the druids. You failed the test, unfortunately. So I don't think they banish you for it, but
being unwilling to.
Unwilling is, that's also a good point. Well, they just call you, they'd probably kick you out and call you and go tell you to go hang out with the other folk. But I still do like the, like, that's the way the jaguar people would feel about the capybara, but also at the same time, like, capybara's got to choose you, man. And you have to have this sort of aura about you, or way of life that is appropriate. And so it's like, I do like to think of the capybara as still like, it's not just like choosing people willy-nilly. It is very wise, and so they respect it very much. And so when it does make a decision, they're like, we know it's right. And so I think that's just such a cool idea, and it does it creates also, again, as always, a bit of a conflict in between, like, how are these people going to interact, and do they cross each other's borders at any point? And try and do anything to do with that. And the river, I think, is going to be such a important piece of their all of their sort of spiritualities as well. And I think it's going to be an interesting thing to expand on as well.
Yeah. So there was one thing that I wanted to mention, visual wise representation for this area.
Yeah.
I really like the idea if, because the jungle is going to stretch out towards and start to be changed by this big old rift.
Yeah.
I like the idea that, like, kind of as you get closer to this, it turns from, you know, we were talking about just basically like big, thick, lush jungle with like large, like separated trees, right? What if some of the portion that's kind of been changed, kind of been tainted, is like a dual level forest almost? Like where there's like the ground floor, and then there's like, you got like the forest floor.
Yeah.
And then you have like, just sometimes there's like big gaps that sort of like just drop down, and there's like an entire other like jungle down there.
Yeah.
And like, you still get like tons of light because maybe like there's, you know, all kinds of like holes and like light shining through like the leaves and stuff like that do get below there. So it's still like a lush jungle, but there's kind of like these dual levels.
Interesting.
And like
a Minecraft forest.
Yeah.
You ever had that where you're like, oh, I'm on ground level, and then you dig two sets of leaves down and you're like, I'm really high up in the air. When did this fucking happen?
But so there's like these two levels of a jungle, and like it kind of adds also like a different layer of kind of like spookiness, given that this is the jaguar's place, because it can like be on either level, and you could be like 25 feet away from it, but it could just be like below you, and then like creeps up right in front of you out like one of these holes,
or even scarier, above you.
Yeah.
You're on the bottom level, and it's just like, hey, how you doing?
But like, so this bottom level is like darker, but there's still like a good amount of light that gets through, like, you know, in these gaps or whatever. But just kind of like
it's more dim light,
jungle was something that popped into my head when I was thinking about sort of ways that this would shift as it gets closer to the territory of this rift.
Yeah, that is kind of a cool idea, because even like just topographically, like just the area starts to get up just more up and down, and so when it comes down to your ability to interpret what's ground level and what's not gets skewed. And so I do like that idea as well, because it's not only the ground, but it's not only the forest, but the ground itself that's becoming sort of changed and morphed and harder to navigate. So that is a really, really cool idea. Although it's so cool that I like the idea, because so this is one thing I was kind of thinking of as well, again, to separate and make more diverse both sides, is I think one thing that could be interesting is sort of the type of plant life. Yeah. It is all jungle all the way throughout, but perhaps on the capybara side, you see a little bit more fungus growing and stuff like that. You see a lot more like large or giant mushrooms or something like that, and so that's just like a little bit of a theme as well. And then on the jaguar side, maybe you see a little bit more just like thorny vines or man-eating plant life. Again, just to try and take the theme and really drive it home even further, is to just have like there is jungle, but the jungle shifts in how it feels, even on a plant life level as well. Now, when you're talking about multiple levels of forest, the idea that if you go into that lower level on the capybara side, and there's like this sort of bioluminescent set of mushrooms, kind of called out to me as well.
But like
you said, like that's most. What was spawning that was the idea
of the thing, like sort of like splitting and changing the landscape.
Although what we could do instead of having like a multi-tiered forest, is to just have a large amount of like caves or cave adjacent sort of things, like cliff overhangs and stuff like that, and little areas underneath the ground that might merit more of again, a bioluminescent sort of plant life. So instead of having, like, both jungles are two-tiered in a way, but one of them's in a very different way than the other, this one's technically subterranean in some respect, and then the other one's more on the level of like, yeah, it's above ground, but it's due to the plant life that it has this sort of multi-tiered system. The capybara side looks a little bit more like the jungle underground in Terraria.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just wanted to pitch that as well. It's just kind of another little motif.
Love the visual.
That separates them as well. Frick, that's a lot more than I thought was going to come out of the...
Yeah, we start talking about the duality of man.
Yeah.
The circle of life. And
much deeper episode than intended.
Yeah, very philosophical.
Yin and yang, man.
Yeah. The Tao.
Honestly, yeah, I think it got us a couple of some cool places and two civilizations when I was expecting one.
Yeah.
I'm happy with that. That's good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Thanks for coming along on the ride with us there.
And we'll see you in the end slate. Hey, welcome to the end card, and thanks for watching the episode. We have a few more comments to go through, and so I guess we'll just get right into them. Another one by Barry Bars Boldia 197. This is, I think, from chapter 11. A good way to get the thousands of teeth could be to make it a filter feeder like whale's baleen, not tooth, but tooth-like. If you want to keep the shark-like, then I'd say go off a whale shark for reference. It's definitely a really cool idea, and frankly, there is no animal I like more than whales, let me assure you. Blue whales are my favorite thing that exists. I'm not sure how it would work for swords, but I guess, yeah, if the baleen's big enough,
if it's big enough, you basically pull one out, and that's the blade, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You just slap a hilt on that thing.
More of a spear, but yeah, that would absolutely work. That is kind of a cool idea as well. Maybe we'll integrate that. We might go shark, maybe we'll go with that, but we'll have to see in the future, so thanks for the suggestion, yeah.
If you've out there seen James and the Giant Peach, the live action / animated, it's both.
Okay.
There's like a creature in that, I'm pretty sure that's from that, where it's like a mechanical shark with like rotating rows of thousands of teeth.
Wow, that's horrifying.
It sure is. Anyway, that popped into my head as well, but the baleen is a good idea.
Yeah, totally. Well, again, thank you for the suggestion.
Yeah. I've got one here from Quartz Chrysalis again. Thank you for your comment. It says, on episode 3, at 31 minutes and 45 seconds, check that out, and this is in regards to sort of those like obelisk-like formations in the ocean where like those monks hang out and speak to the wind dragon.
Right.
What about part of the path being just handholds carved into a completely smooth cliff face? Also in the middle of the desert, this is in regards to the desert.
Yeah.
Because it's such a change in altitude from the otherwise flat dunes, it promotes precipitation, making it the only source of water in the desert. First off, the precipitation thing, very cool idea, because it can be very, very difficult to get fresh water in the desert.
Yeah.
So it is a very, very good idea. And then as far as the like the handholds up the side thing goes, for some reason that one struck in my head especially because I feel like originally I had anticipated it being easier to get up. But the entire sort of identity of this place is that it's separated.
Yeah.
Like physically, spiritually, like there's so many levels of separation.
Yeah.
And that really makes it like very, very difficult to get up and get down. Mm-hmm. It poses another challenge for these people. Mm-hmm. And I find that really interesting. The thing that kind of prevented me from immediately being like, yeah, that's sweet, is then so hard to get like any food that isn't grown there or caught on top of these pillars from being able to get up. Like you can't do any trade. But then I was thinking like, what if you did like a pulley system, you attach like ropes and you can like basket a couple of like fish or something up. Or if these people just like, you know, have like a small satchel or something like that on there. So you can still get stuff up, but only like what you can carry or something like that. Yeah, no, I was going to mention the idea that it's just like, it just adds more importance to what they can actually bring up there. Yeah, exactly. Like it's, if they ever want a handful of meat, yeah, it's probably going to be fish. Or like seals. Yeah, or just like something small that they can carry like a larger quantity of. And so they just,
all they can do is climb.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, they just have to carry a little bit, which would probably make them honestly eat more vegetables instead, because they would be easier to transport. But yeah, I can only imagine like being one of the few people who ever actually makes the trek up to the top and being like, where's the path?
Yeah.
This is the path.
Yeah.
Like, and meanwhile the guy is carrying a backpack that's like 150 pounds, and he's climbing faster than you. And
it's like an old man, like, yeah, sure, I'll show you the way or whatever. And he starts climbing, and then the wind blows, and it like swooshes his shirt to the side, and he's just ripped. And you're like, no.
my anxieties. That's what I'm sensitive about.
So anyway, cool ideas. Thank you for the comment.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks for tuning into the episode. Remember to like us on Spotify, comment if you want to be seen in one of these videos, or DM us on Instagram, and remember to like us on Instagram as well. So thanks for tuning in. We'll see you again.